All right, so again, now I'm jumping back to our textbook. This is the beginning of Chapter 18. Not going to read to you. All right. Notice though they say using data sources and data sets the easiest way. They're going to run through what we just did. So this chapter, they break down into 4 sections. Right now, we're going to go over just the first section. All right. Tomorrow, just to show you in advance what we're doing, I got to find it. There it is. We're going to write this one when you come in here tomorrow. Again, I will give you the code. It's not a lot of code, but we will write this. It looks like it's about not even 100 lines. So we will write this. This thing right here is called a data grid view. It's going to look, when I run the program in just a minute, it's going to look a lot like a spreadsheet would look. So we can now come in here. I probably should make this bigger so you can read it better. But if I say select star from customers like we did before, and I click execute, it now fills up the customers table. It's filling it up in one of these data grid views. If I want this to be a little wider, I can click here and I can make it wider. I can do whatever I want to do with it. You with me? And it says that 27 records were returned. When you click clear, it clears the grid and it puts your cursor back into here. When we've got our old familiar exit button too. So we're going to build this tomorrow. In fact, what I'll do before the end of the period today is I'll run off a picture as I have been doing, and there's not many controls on here, 4 or 5. All right, so we can just start and boom, get to it right away. So the plan is, right now I'm going to go over the first quarter of the chapter. Tomorrow we will build this thing you see right here, and then we will go over the second part and the third part of the chapter. All right. Then on Friday, we will go over the last part. It's the most intricate because it talks about using the data designer. All right. That'll get us through this. Also on Friday, we will be going over again the written test for Chapter 18. Next Monday, we will begin on Chapter 19. I talked to Mr. Corrigan this morning. There will be no class next Tuesday. I'm getting my second shot, and I told him I'll come in for my afternoon class. He said, listen, you could have you could have medical. My wife got really sick after her second one. She got the same vaccine I did, and she was sick for 2 days afterwards. I mean, really sick. All right. I'm hoping that doesn't happen to me, but he said, just take off the rest of the day. Work from home. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'll be driving to Hannibal Low in the morning, driving back in the afternoon. So no class Tuesday. So we will start on Chapter 19 on Monday. We will continue Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And the hope is then a week from Friday, we will go over the written test and be done with Chapter 19. Then the next week, the same thing with 20. Then the week after that, which is our last week, we'll spend at least Monday and Tuesday on Chapter 23, I think I said it was, the thing on link. And then the rest of the time will be for you to finish up and also to create your portfolios. I'll have a little bit to say for you guys here about what you're going to be taking next semester, and also for you guys what you're going to be taking next semester. All right? Okay. I don't know, and again, I get very interested in what I'm about to tell you, and that is, I think probably 2 weeks from Monday, that's usually when she does it. That's like the third, I think, the last week of class. I've told you this before. You guys have gone through it, you 4. Ms. Bruggeman will come in here. This wall between these rooms this wall opens. They'll open the wall. And either that or they'll have you go into Mr. Corrigan's room. I don't know what they'll do, but they'll probably do it that way. And then you will do course evaluations. When we do stuff like this, I think it's easier to show it to you and then lecture about it than it is to lecture about it. If you think that the way I've been presenting the material here has been inferior, you should put that down. That's your right. You're paying for this, or somebody is. But I need to learn, I need to know that. I only grow as an instructor if people give me constructive criticism, if they give it. You know, the school I used to work at, they would have you do stuff from 1 to 5, where 1 was the worst and 5 was the best. Do you understand? And I'd say a third of the people who filled out those forms every semester, they gave me 1s for everything, which is the worst. And then under the comments, they put down, don't change anything. He's doing a great job and I love the course. Well, that kind of said to me, they don't know how to read or follow instructions or both. But she will tell you what to do. Not only will you come in and be doing this class, you'll probably be doing your Gen Ed classes too. And with your Gen Ed classes, I mean, those are tougher. Those are tough classes for them to give you, because typically there's not a lot of interaction. But if there's something that did or did not work, please put that down, whether it be me or one of those instructors. If they listen. I know there was somebody who they used to come in here. They used to, in that other building, you used to take your Gen Eds in there. And you all were in that big hall that was in there. This is pre-COVID. But 1 year, the person that they hired, you know, I'm saying this, it's being taped, but nobody liked that person. And I don't mean as a person, they didn't like the way that person taught. I don't know if it was a man or a woman, I don't know. But from what I heard, 90% of the people ripped on that person. They weren't back the next year. So the school does listen to what you have to say. All right. Okay. So we're going to go over the first part. Starts on 560, ends on 573. All right. So the first almost 15 pages. How to create a data source. Well, that's what we just did. How to use the data source window. How to start the wizard. How to choose a data source type, etc. I'm not going to read them all, but you see them. All right. So that's what we're going to go through. You just saw it pictorially yourselves. Okay, notice here, because you hear that term. So as it says here, a data source itself, so a data source specifies the source of a data for an application. Normally, in these kinds of applications, it's a database. The whole big term here is the word persistence. If you want to be able to put something into a file or into a database, it persists over sessions. You saw that I got out of SQL Server Management Studio. When I got back in again, my record information was still in there. With all the programs that we ran previous to Chapter 17, we didn't have persistence. You could write the best program ever, and you could run it, and you could have great output, but when you got out of the program, the output was gone. We don't have this anymore. So our data source is going to be the database. And as it says, in the next 6 figures, which is pretty much what we're going to go over the rest of the period here, it shows you how to create a data source that gets its data from a database. All right. It says the data sources that are available are listed in the data sources window that's shown here. This was empty. There was another way to do it from the way that I showed you, but the way I showed you, I'm going for the way that is the most, to me, the easiest to understand way. Okay? All right. This is going to lead me, there's a reason I'm mentioning this to you, because I wanted to show you all something. Doesn't affect you guys directly, it affects you two directly. All right? And that is, I'm going to go out here just to show you this. All right. This is from Mozilla.com. All right. We had a meeting yesterday. You know, I left from 10 o'clock till about 11:15. And we talked about the program. We talked about what's working, what's not working, etc. And between the three of us, I don't think any of us are afraid to talk. And I don't think any of us are afraid to tell our opinions. All right. I don't know what you guys here on the left thought of the books that we used in the first semester class. I will tell you that much of the material in the Muroc book, especially the Muroc HTML CSS, is old. They did very little work, for example, with Flexbox. If you remember that, there was a chapter on that. That's what's used on most websites today. All right. What we are talking about doing, I don't know if we can do this yet. Mr. Corrigan was talking about it. Is we may not have that book. You guys had 2 books. They may have only the JavaScript and jQuery book. Other than that, we may go through this instead. Because it's the old 80-20 rule, we'll teach you 20% of the stuff, you'll use 80% of the time. And I've given this example before. I don't know if you guys have heard it, but I still remember that. I guess I was I don't know, a lot of teachers told me growing up I was a wise ass, for lack of better words. But I remember learning division. Remember that when you learned this and you did something like 1,000 and you had that like divided by 12 and you came over here and you put an 8 and then you put 96 and you had 40 and you put, so that was 80 and then you put a 3 and that, remember that stuff? And then they showed you short division. I remember asking my teacher, why the hell, I almost said it like this, why the hell didn't we just learn short division first? All right. Well, one of the things with the Muroc book, and I'm not ripping on Muroc, they write really good books. But one of the things that they do quite often is they show you 5 or 6 ways how to do something, and you only really need to know 1 or 2, and there's really not a lot of sense in showing you a lot of ways to do something. Between that and the fact that some of the material is antiquated, which is why we're going to probably move to this. But they also have in here, so they've got a big HTML tutorial, followed by a big CSS tutorial, followed by a big JavaScript tutorial, and it goes down. There's a good chance what I'm going to do starting as soon as the semester ends is I'm going to go through this, and I'm going to tape myself going through this, and I'm going to put that up there. Some of the stuff you guys may be able to even use, just because, for example, one of the things we're going to talk about next semester in JavaScript is objects. We're going to talk about asynchronous JavaScript, and we're going to talk about client-side web APIs. We're going to spend quite a bit of time on that. Then we're going to go in and we'll talk about tools and testing, but we'll also talk about React. So there's a lot of good material in there is what I'm telling you. All right. Okay, so let's jump back to the book then. So when we brought this thing up, the idea is if we had originally clicked add new data source, it may have brought that up right away. I don't remember. But I had you walk through the whole process so you could see everything it is you were supposed to do. All right. Now, my guess is if I came in here, I'm not sure what I'm about to tell you, I could be totally wrong. Remember, the only table that we chose was customers, right? But if I came back in here, let's assume for a second we had chosen all 8 tables. You all with me? We had chosen all 8 tables. All right. Then I think we could have come back into, well, the example I had up, we could have added another form and we could have filled that one in automatically with a different table. You understand what I'm saying? We could have done that with all 8 tables if we wanted to, and then had a way to go back and forth between tables. So we would have had basically almost a complete relational database management system for the whole database. That's a lot of what we're going to do. All right, but we're going to do it manually. There's more work involved doing it manually. That's not why we're doing it that way. We're doing it that way so you understand behind the scenes what's happening. All right, but what I'm telling you is after you've created that data source once, you use the same data source, so we should be able to go back in there then and choose a different table. See how it says products here? If we had more than one table and you click the down arrow, you should be able to change the table that's in there. And then you could just, again, drag the stuff out. Now, when we get into, I think it's chapter 20, or it's actually at the end of this chapter, when they talk about that designer, you can go in and you can pretty it up even more than what I was showing you. For instance, you can tell the system that you want fields that are currency fields to have the $sign, the comma, 0.00, etc. All right, so that's what you do with a designer. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. So when you look here, again, it says you can display the data sources window by clicking on the data sources tab that's usually on the left edge of Visual Studio. Well, it's what I showed you. All right. So mine originally was over here. All right, way off to the left. Now I put it, when I chose it and told it to pin, it pinned it right there. Now if I get rid of it, okay, it doesn't show, but I can always go back into a view and it's in here someplace. I guess it was under other windows, data sources, and there it is. So you can do it either way. All right. To create a data source, it says you can click the add new data source link. So there's a lot of ways you can do the same stuff, but they're going to have you come in here and run through what we just did, which, as they mentioned, is the data source configuration wizard. So we came here first, and I'm not going to read to you, but they do explain in here the other things that we're not choosing. Now, with a Windows service, all right, it says there those are used with a different kind of C# program that's known as a WCF or a Windows Communication Foundation program. You would typically use something like that if you were going to write an application that you were going to try to sell as a service. All right, you may have heard there's a lot of things that are out there right now, something that that'll be like IaaS, Internet as a Service, DaaS, Data as a Service. You could make your own service. So if you came up with something that you thought was viable and you could sell it, you could create your own service to do that, as an example. All right. The one that, again, that we're always going to be choosing here is just going to be database. All right. Now, the SharePoint, I wouldn't lie to you, the SharePoint is way over my head. That's the kind of stuff they do over there. All right. And the object, I'm not even sure, I don't remember offhand what that exactly lets you do. All right. So again, we're always going to be, all right, we're always going to be using the database one. Okay. So how to choose the database model. It says the second step lets you choose the type of database model. The only option currently available is dataset. Visual Studio, as it says, will generate a data set for you. That's what we want anyway. The third step says lets you choose the data connection you want to use. They do explain in here some of the different connections and the different connection options. And again, if you don't have anything in here, you'll choose new connection. If you have a connection in here, but let's just say it was to a different database, then you again would choose new connection and you'd go through the same steps that I just showed you that we just went through. All right. And eventually then you should have this. Now they're using their MMA books database. Ours is sales orders. I had you click the checkbox here to show you what the data source was. Their data source is a little different. Notice data source equal and it's got local DB. There's a lot of ways you can connect. I've done this a multiple number of ways over the years. The one that I settled on with you guys as I went through it first, and it seemed to be the most intuitive and straightforward to me. All right. And you'll notice in their integrated security, they have true this one right here, connect timeout equal 30. That typically means wait 30 seconds, and if you can't connect within 30 seconds, don't even try anymore. All right. There are defaults that are set up for that too. But if you can't literally leave it up forever. So if you can't connect, it'll just sit there and keep trying and trying and trying. Now that's taking up system resources, but technically you could do that if you wanted to. So we went through these steps. Again, don't want to read to you. If you want more than what you think I gave you, please take a look at the bottom on the right-hand page where they give a little bit of a description. All right? All right. Then it says if you click the new connection wizard from the third step, the add connection dialog box in 18.4 is described. This describes the one I went over with you. And like I said, we chose the third one, and here they're choosing the fourth one. They're choosing the fourth one because they connected a little bit differently than the way I had you connect. All right. There are different versions of the SQL Server that you can download. The one they chose is different than the one I chose. If you want more on that, you can look, I believe if you go to the appendix at the end of the book, they'll go through all the steps that they did. So again, they explain the different connection types in here, but it's not much more than what you get when you highlight any of them. You'll also notice when you look in here, there's an other. All right, that's important for two reasons. First of all, that's not every single relational database management system there is. Secondly, I've never tried this, but I think you can connect to non-relational database management systems. And third, I think you can connect to non-databases. So under other, you probably could connect to a spreadsheet, for example. All right. And they go through a lot of this stuff, as you see in here, is historical in nature. All right. Plus, they'll say stuff like, then you need to get connection information from the network or the database administrator. Well, it would be the database administrator if we were all using the same database. I tried doing that at the school I used to be at. That was a real pain. We tried it for a semester just to see how it would work. And, you know, if somebody would go in there and either maliciously or accidentally, it was easy for one person to remove the entire database. Then we had to rebuild it again. And I said, I never want to do that again. All right. Saving the connection string in the app config file. That's, again, if you click on this, the checkbox, it's not hurting anything, and it's just going to save that information for you, the connection string info. All right. And again, so you check this, and then you can call this whatever you want. So notice, that's the type of information that's saved if you look on the screen. That, again, is XML or Extensible Markup Language code. All right. So it says, by default, the connection string is saved in the app.config file. Okay? It says if that's not what you want, you can uncheck it. I don't see a reason for ever unchecking it. There may be one. If you don't save the connection string in the file, it's specified for the connection of each table adapter. So in other words, you're going to have to add it every time. Again, I don't see what that buys you. So they even recommend that you always save it. You can enter the name you want to use. By default, it's the name of the database, followed by connection string. So again, ours would be sales orders connection string. Whereas when I did it with you, we just called it con string. We could have called our sales orders connection string. Wouldn't have hurt anything. All right. Then how to choose the database objects. This is what I showed you before. I'm taken for granted because nobody said anything that you guys were all able to get to here. All right. And again, the only one that we chose was customers. And then we opened it up even more and just chose what we wanted. What I'm going to be working on probably this weekend is there's not enough time in 2 weeks for us to go and build an application with all 8 tables in here. It's just, it ain't going to work. So I'm going to pick out 2 or 3 of them and try to start building the application myself. And you might say, well, it's not going to be that hard. You could do this. No, I want ours to be as bulletproof as we can make it. So for instance, if you remember all that stuff that we put in at the beginning where we tried to connect, that should have been in a try-catch block. What if I typed in the wrong database name? What if the database didn't exist? What if the database, I gave it a wrong path? It should have all been in a try-catch block. And if it didn't work, we should have made sure we didn't go on. All right, that's the kind of thing I want to bring into this. Okay, all right. So as it says, this is the last step because there's just finish afterwards, or previous if you want to back up, or cancel if you don't want it. All right. So it says in this step, you can choose from any tables, views, etc. that you want. You can also enter the name you want to use in the data set. There's more to it than this. You're going to see more to it starting tomorrow when we go on in this chapter. All right. So it says how to work with columns that have default values. It says if a column in the database has a default value, that value isn't included in the column definition of the data set. Because of that, you may want to omit columns with default values. Now, who cares? What I want to tell you is this. Look up on the screen, please. There was nothing that said we had to choose all of these. And what I mean is, even under customers, what if the only thing we might want to change, let's just pretend for a second that the only thing that might change for a customer is their last name. That's it. Then that's all we have to choose. We can now go in and change any of this stuff. All right. So we could come in for any customer now, other than their ID. We could change their first name, their last name, their street address, their city, their state, their zip code, their area code, or their phone number. That actually makes sense. Companies move, they get bigger, they get smaller, so they may change their place of operation. All right, so that made sense to do that. It may not always make sense to do that. All right. So it says here, the schema that's filled in by the data connection wizard. All right. This is what we're going to start getting to tomorrow. I'm not going to go through it, but I want to show you this. If you look on the screen, it says, wow, it created a bunch of stuff in here for us. All right. And you may or may not be able to read this, but for example, right here, it says MMA books database.xsd. XSD is an XML schema definition file. So we're going to start looking at that stuff tomorrow. All right. It's not my goal to see how fast we can rush through this. All right. And actually, I wish we had a couple more weeks. I think it would work a lot better. It is what it is. All right. So we will talk about that tomorrow. So we'll step through this section. That's the schema file created by the data configuration or data source configuration wizard. So we'll jump through that. A little more on the data set. Then we'll talk about the grid view. All right, so we'll go through that. And that should get us to about, I think it's here, where we handle data errors. Depending on where we are for time, we might go through that section as well. And a lot of stuff with data errors is what you'd expect. If you allow the user, I mean, you should all get this right now, that in the example that we just created, the one after the break, if we leave the area code blank, or we put in something non-numeric for the area code, and we try to save it, we should get an error. All right. There's different kinds of SQL exceptions that you can get. You're going to see some of those tomorrow. Or we're purposely going to set it up, and we're going to break our program on purpose so you can see the type of errors that you can get. All right. So again, we'll probably get into that tomorrow. Notice there's the try catch. Talk about how to handle those errors. Okay. And then on Friday, we'll go through this last section on how to use the dataset designer. And as already mentioned, we will also go over the written test for Chapter 18. So please try to have that done. We'll probably do that first thing in the morning. So that's what we've got left for the rest of the week. That's not real long. It's only about 10 pages, but it talks about how we can use this. It's called the Query Builder. It's a semi-GUIized tool that you can use to do stuff. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up, I have absolutely no idea what I'm about to ask you, but if there's anybody in here that's ever used, for example, Microsoft Access, they've got a tool that's very similar to this. You could easily say one was patterned after the other one. All right, but we will go through that, and I'm not saying you'll totally understand it. It'll make 100% sense. But we'll talk about that, and that'll be it. Then, like I said, next week says how to work with bound controls. I don't even want to get into what those are, but parameterized queries are what I mentioned to you previously. They allow you to set up interactive queries. So I can run the same query while the program is running, and I can put in different criteria so that I see different records. Case in point, let's assume for a second that I had a bunch of historical data in there. I could run a query once and I could say, what was my top selling product for the year 2019. Then I could run it again and ask what was the top selling one for 2020 to see if it was the same product, etc. What's nice about parameterized queries is you can, if you write generic enough queries, they can be run by a lot of different departments in a company to get the information they're interested in looking for. So that's what we'll be going into next week. All right. Now it's 10:17. Feel free to take another break. We still have an hour and a half. I am done for today.